Thank you very much for attending. We would like to start Sasaka Peace Foundation hosted SPF China Observer Public Forum. Good afternoon. Today we are going to talk about China's plutonium production and nuclear arms expansion. The speaker is Dr. Yuki Kobayashi, SPF Research Fellow, and as a discussant, the person I respect very much, General Oue Sadamasa. Regarding the buildup of the Chinese, nuclear warheads, the U.S. has significantly increased its estimate for the number of these warheads, and it will increase from 1,000 in 2030 to 1,500 nuclear warheads in 2030. This year and last year, such projections have been published. In the last public forum, China Observer, we talked about the reasons for these numbers, and China is producing plutonium for civil use, power generation, and that may be diverted to military purpose. And if we consider these numbers, they are aligned with U.S. projections. Today, we would like to make a step forward. What kind of facilities are being used to produce civilian use plutonium to be diverted to nuclear weapons? What is the status of progress, and when these facilities will be operational? And including those issues, Mr. Kobayashi is going to make a presentation. I invite you, Dr. Kobayashi, to speak.
Thank you very much. I am Kobayashi. I belong to the Security Research Group at SPF. This is the group working on nuclear arms and nuclear non-proliferation. We will be using satellite pictures, and we'd like to consider with you the situation in China regarding this topic. Following the handouts, I would like to explain. So China is trying to make the nuclear arms build-up, trying to have balance with the United States. Next page, please. U.S. Defense Department, as Dr. Ohara mentioned, every year submits a report to the Congress regarding the military trends of China, entitled Military and Security Development. In version 2020, it said that the number of warheads will increase by 2 times by 2030, at present on the range of up to 250 warheads. In version 2021, it talked about the possibility of reaching 1,000 warheads by 2030. And recently published 2022, it talks about the possibility of reaching 1,500 by 2035. What is the backdrop to that? China would increase plutonium production, which should be used for the power generation, and secretly they are trying to convert it to military use. Concretely speaking, from the spent fuel from the nuclear power plants, plutonium is separated, which is nuclear fuel reprocessing facility, and then they mix with uranium, that is MOX fuel, and they are planning to use it in a faster breeder reactor. At the faster breeder reactor, MOX fuel could be combusted, and then it can retrieve plutonium-239, which is of high purity that can be used in nuclear weapon. In August, the NPT review conference was held at the headquarters of the United Nations in New York. In this conference, they adamantly opposed to the proposal to stop production of nuclear fissile material, which is expected to have the effect of controlling or restraining nuclear buildup. Next page. In this seminar, we obtained satellite pictures which shows the reprocessing facilities and the construction of faster breeder reactor in China. We would like to analyze these pictures. Thereby, we can support the movement of China to the nuclear arms buildup. announced by Defense Department and the neighboring countries. And also I'd like to talk about what Japan should do. Next page, please. China, since 2015, in the inland part, Gansu province desert area was where they began the construction of 2 reprocessing plants. Chinese government and the operating body, that is the CNMC, is not making any clear explanation about those plants. The first plant would become operational by 2025. The second plant would be operational by 2030. That is estimated. That is clear from the satellite pictures. The satellite pictures that you see now was photographed on the 7th of October 2019. This is the construction site of the nuclear fuel reprocessing plant in Gansu province. The next one is the photo taken in the same place, February 28th of the same year. Next page, please. This is the satellite picture number 2. The spent fuel would be used to retrieve plutonium. The green is the reprocessing facility doing that, and then plutonium is mixed with uranium. That is the MOX fuel plant. That is indicated in red. The picture 1 is taken from afar, so it's difficult to see. So I will analyze this using picture number 2. In picture 2, the first plant, that is the green colored, and the second plant, there is a clear delineation between those 2 plants. Compared with the first picture, in 3-year time, construction work is making progress. And also another point noteworthy is that in plants on number 2 and number 2, the white tower stacks are built. It is shown in blue in the picture. The long shadow is clearly shown. You can see the long shadow. So viewing from the long shadow, we can surmise that it is a very high building, high rise. So this is the first process of retrieving plutonium from spent fuel. This is the facility for shearing and dissolving spent fuel. In this process, a small amount of radioactive gas is generated. That's why it is taken from stacks. So the processes are composed of 4 stages. The first one is a shear and dissolution. The spent fuel is broken into small pieces and immersed in nitric acid. The second process is that the dissolved uranium and plutonium were separated. The third process is refining. Uranium and plutonium were refined. The fourth process is fabrication. Uranium and plutonium would be made into powder, and it will be made into a shape suitable for fabricating into MOX fuel. Incidentally, the reprocessing facility in Japan, in Aomori, they have cleared all the processes that I mentioned. However, after the fabrication, the high-level radioactive waste liquid has to be disposed, and there was a problem in the process of making a vitrified container. So after the Fukushima accident in 2011, new safety measures were necessary. That's why the operation is delayed. Please go back to satellite picture number 2. This is number 2. In the facility in Gansu province, in both the first and the second plants, the process number 1, shear and dissolution facilities are completed. Regarding unit number 1, the foundational work of other processes have finished, and they went into the equipment delivery. I think the first plant has a high probability of operational in a couple of years. The fast breeder reactor where plutonium usage is expected, the plutonium is newly produced because of the nuclear fuels reaction in operation, and plutonium recovery is possible. That's why it is called a dream nuclear reactor. Together with US and France, Japan made technology development for the commercialization of fast breeder reactor. We had Bonji operational. However, the sodium control was very difficult to cool nuclear reactor. At present, other than Russia and China, other countries are have suspended or frozen the development of fast breeder reactor. In Japan, Monju is decided to be decommissioned. In China, CFR 600 is the name given to the fast breeder reactor 2 units. In Fujian province, the construction is going on, and it is expected to become operational in 2023 and 2026. Now, I'd like to introduce to you the satellite picture of the site of fast breeder reactor construction. The picture number 3 was taken on the January 30th, 2020, and number 4 was taken in 2030. The picture shows certain distortion, but you can clearly identify the construction status. However, in the image 4, we can clearly see that the foundational work is making progress. Regarding CFR Unit 1, we can see that 2 major facilities are near completion from the more recent pictures. So the foundational work is making progress. From the shape of it, the building shown in red is the building that houses the fast breeder reactor, and the building shown in blue looks like a turbine building where power is generated by rotating turbine with the steam generated by the reactor heat. Including other facilities, we can surmise that CFR 600 Unit 1 is near completion and can analyze that the commissioning is possible during fiscal 2023.
The successful development of fast breeder reactors would dramatically increase the ability to produce plutonium, which is necessary for the nuclear build-up. Let me explain the reason for that, reviewing the history of nuclear development. Next page, please. Let me review the history of nuclear development in various countries. In the early days of nuclear energy use, and even today in countries with inferior technology, plutonium for weapon use has been produced with graphite reactor. The photo you are seeing shows the fuel assembly of a graphite reactor. Graphite reactors have the advantage of being able to use natural uranium as fuel, dispensing with fuel production process, and to easily extract plutonium through reprocessing. But on the other hand, as you can see in the image, each spent fuel assembly contains only 1 gram or so of plutonium. So in order to produce a weapon-grade plutonium, it is necessary to replenish and burn a large amount of fuel over and over. The reason as follows. Natural uranium contains uranium-235, which is fissile and fit for fuel, and uranium-238, which is non-fissile. However, the former accounts for only 0.7% in natural uranium, and it burns up quickly as fuel in about 2 weeks. Uranium-238, which makes up 99.3% of natural uranium, can generate plutonium when it is hit by neutrons generated during the burning of uranium-235 in a nuclear reactor. However, only a very small amount of uranium-238 is converted to plutonium-239 in a short span of 2 weeks. And this is the reason why with graphite reactors you can't produce a lot of plutonium, but North Korea is using this reactor. By the way, light water reactors used in Japan and other countries use fuel that has been enriched to raise the ratio of uranium-235 to 3 to 5% in order to generate electricity efficiently over a long period of time. The next page, please. In fast breeder reactors, the plutonium fuel burns for 6 months to a year to generate electricity and release neutrons. Since uranium-238 wraps up the plutonium fuel, it is called a blanket fuel, as shown in blue in the figure. And this blanket fuel is mostly converted to plutonium-239. If the FBR is used purely for power generation purpose, the newly produced plutonium is also used as fuel. But if the blanket fuel is extracted and reprocessed when it is converted to plutonium, a large amount of very pure plutonium suitable for weapon use can be obtained, more specifically plutonium with a ratio of plutonium-239 over 90%. Next page, please. If I may talk about a little bit more something complicated, fuel reprocessing entails different results between FBR and more common light water reactors used in Japan and other countries in terms of the ratio of plutonium-239 produced. Plutonium extracted from reprocessed spent fuel from FBRs meets the requirements for nuclear weapons grade plutonium because the ratio is above 90%, but plutonium extracted from light water reactors contain large amount of plutonium 238, plutonium 240, and plutonium 242, which are known to undergo spontaneous nuclear fission repeatedly, explode early and completely, and emit heat and can damage trigger device. Although we can't say that the nuclear armament is impossible with plutonium from light water reactor, but it would be difficult to possess deployable nuclear weapons using light water reactors. But I hope it is possible to extract plutonium-239 good for weapon use, as I said earlier, but the only small amount of plutonium is very, very limited. Therefore, in order to produce weapon-grade plutonium, you need a fast breeder reactor, and also that can lead to nuclear arms buildup, as you can easily understand. Next page, please. So that is why IAEA, from the viewpoint of nuclear non-proliferation, strictly monitored the status of fuels during the operation of Bonji in Japan. But China is recognized nuclear weapon state under the NPT and not obliged to undergo IAEA inspections. Therefore, once the full-scale operation of FBR starts in China, there is high possibility that the international community will not be able to grasp the trends of nuclear fuels and materials in China. So this is an important point when we consider China's nuclear expansion. So if the 2 units of CFR 600 begin in operation in China as scheduled in 2023 and 25, China will be able to acquire up to 330 kilograms of weapon-grade plutonium per year. Since the amount of plutonium needed per warhead is 3 to 3.5 kilograms, this is equivalent to 82 to 110 warheads. And it is estimated that China will have accumulated 2.9 tons, give or take 0.6 tons of weapon-grade plutonium at the end of 2030. This is equivalent to 830, give or take 210 nuclear weapon warheads. The Pentagon's analysis supporting the possibility of China possessing 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030 and 1,500 by 2035, which I introduced at the outset, is consistent with China's outlook for increased plutonium production. Next page, please. If China continues to increase plutonium production and expand its nuclear arsenal, as predicted by the Pentagon, it will have a serious impact on the world and neighboring countries in terms of both security and nuclear non-proliferation. I want to ask General Oue on this point later on in detail. But I believe that Japan is asked regarding how we can respond to such a situation as a neighboring country. Japan is the only non-nuclear weapon state authorized to extract plutonium and to use it in a fast breeder reactors. This is a result of effort by Japan as the only country to have suffered atomic bombing in a war of fully cooperating with the IAEA in utilizing nuclear materials that can be used for military purposes and achieving both nuclear non-proliferation and peaceful use of nuclear energy. So we are in a position to urge China to desist from using civilian nuclear technology for military purpose without reporting to the IAEA. We need to continue our analysis using satellite image technology to verify China's use of reprocessing facilities and fast breeder reactors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. including the technical analysis. Concrete numbers were shown in his presentation. So Chinese civilian military dual use conversion there between was mentioned in his presentation. Regarding his presentation and regarding the future discussion, you can put your questions on the chat box. Please state your name and affiliation and enter your question in chat box. Now we heard the nuclear arms buildup was discussed in his presentation. First of all, let me start from a fundamental question. Why nuclear weapons are so important as such? What is a nuclear deterrence? And if a nuclear arms buildup occurs in China, Japan is now placed under the deterrence umbrella of the United States. So what will be the impact in various countries in terms of nuclear deterrence? So retired General Oue, please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. I am Oue. I used to be the Air Lieutenant General. Mr. Kobayashi had a very exact and objective analysis of the situation with these satellite images. Reprocessing facilities construction has commenced, and by 2025, first unit, and by 2035, the second unit would be estimated to become operational. So by the end of 2030, weapon-grade plutonium accumulated amount would be 3 tons, and 1,000 warheads could be the possession of China. This was proven objectively in his presentation. So in the by 2027, 700 warheads, 2030, the 1,500 warheads mentioned in DOD's report. So his analysis agrees with the DOD's statement. As Mr. Ohara said, China's nuclear strategy, is there likelihood that strategy could change? And if a nuclear strategy changes in China, what would be the impact on Japan's defense? And lastly, Japan as the recipient of such impact, what are the measures that Japan should be taking? I'd like to talk about those points. First, the nuclear strategy of China. In the past, China said that the minimum deterrence was what they said. When they were attacked, then the enemy countries' cities, bases, and facilities could be attacked. That ability should be retained by China. So this was a minimum deterrence. That was the policy taken in China. In July 2019, in the Defense White Paper of China, the unconditional non-use in a preemptive way to the non-nuclear countries, nuclear attacks will not be staged, and as necessary, minimum nuclear power would be possessed. So that was the strategy they announced. No change, basically. However, U.S. Department of Defense says in inland area, in 300 places, ICBM sites are being constructed, and then the Kyoto number 3, the new missile is developed. So-called nuclear 3 pillars ability is being built up. So the parity between China and U.S., in other words, mutually assured destruction is trying to be attained. I think it is for certain that China is trying to do that. Of course, everything is opaque regarding Chinese nuclear strategy. People's Liberation Army is saying that they will treat equally the conventional weapon and nuclear weapon. However, the 350 warheads that they have the launch on warning status. Is it on launch on warning status or strategic nuclear, the low-power nuclear warheads are possessed? We don't know about those questions. So, by way of ensuring transparency, it is very important to engage China into the framework of nuclear deterrence. Now, 106 ICBM and medium-range missiles at 270 units, and the submarine-launched missiles, 72 units, and then H6, 104 H6 are possessed, according to the defense paper. Defense white paper, it is estimated, especially the 500 to 1,500 range, middle change, they have more than 200. U.S. Because of the INF treaty of with the USSR, U.S. does not have that ability. In the Ukrainian war, Russian President Putin is making the blustering over the international community. Escalation deterrence is the strategy that they are using, and they are Russia is trying to check the moves of the Western allies. So if the Taiwan is to be invaded, we cannot deny the possibility that China uses the same strategy. So if China establishes MAD, there is a paradox of stability and instability. In other words, U.S. and China would be stable because of the strategy, but the hurdle will become lower for the regional conventional wars, and therefore Taiwan Strait may become unstable. So from this analysis regarding Chinese nuclear arms buildup, we have to watch very closely, and the cutoff treaty must be activated once again, which will control the nuclear fissile materials, and thereby we must restrain the nuclear capability of China. Suppose that the China changes from minimum deterrence, and if they want to establish MAD with the United States, what will be the impact on Japan? That is my next topic. According to the media report, it will be revised soon, and the national security strategy, Chinese hegemonistic movement is positioned as the largest challenge for Japan, and geopolitical trends would become a very serious concern for Japan. According to a media report, Japan may go for that direction. Senkaku Islands have to be protected, and Taiwan Strait is an existential threat for us. So China changes a strategy, then we must analyze its impact on Japan, and we must be prepared to take measures against that, especially for Taiwan contingency. Escalation deterrence is to be implemented by China, and if China follows the scenario of restraining our ability to support the U.S., I think we should be prepared for that. The Chinese civilian group posted a video movie, and the title of that is that if Japan is interfering with our movement in Taiwan, our country should certainly resort to the nuclear strategy. I think this is a part of the propaganda trying to affect the Chinese policy. Of course, it is important that we react to such announcements, but at the same time, we must enhance U.S. enlarged and expanded deterrence. We must act on it so that it is ensured. So the counterattack ability would be not intending the direct attack on China. U.S. has a nuclear strategy, and U.S. has a Sino policy. So we can become the leverage of deeply involved in the U.S. policy. So China can be reacting very fiercely on the counterattack capability that Japan has. But this is to be explained that this is against North Korea, not against China. So regarding North Korean denuclearization, we must ask China to cooperate in our endeavor. Last point is that China engaged the nuclear arms control system. Nuclear weaponry is different from Cold War days, as shown in Ukrainian situation. It is used on the extension of the conventional weapons. We have to consider nuclear weapon on the extension of conventional weapon. So China, Russia, North Korea, these are the, we are adjacent to those nuclear nations. And then we are dependent upon the expanded deterrence from the United States, which is far. So we must work to enhance the confidence and the reliability of expanded deterrence. At the same time, we have to engage China regarding arms control and arms limitation involving nuclear weapons. In August of this year, review conference of NPT was held, and the final document was not made. It wasn't successful. The Russia opposed to it because they are at war with Ukraine, but China was also recalcitrant about their position. So they asserted that China is not going to lead this initiative, and AUKUS introducing the nuclear submarine is a risk of nuclear proliferation. On the other hand, as Mr. Kobayashi mentioned in his presentation, the weapon-grade plutonium production as well as transparency thereof, China was very strongly opposed to having those provisions in the agreement. As Dr. Kobayashi said, they did not like the involvement and the interference over the plutonium strategy that they have. During the Cold War, US and the USSR were very serious about the arms control. They identified mutual inspection and the basic conditions requiring that. So if nuclear parity is possessed by China, then US, China, Russia, tripartite negotiation would happen. So it is not the bilateral negotiation, therefore, for the nuclear arms control and arms limitation. If it is left in the hands of China, US, and Russia alone, we will not be able to have significant resolution. So we are confronting against China. We are the party in question. We are adjacent to China. So we must lead the efforts for the arms control so that we must ask China to change its posture regarding nuclear strategy. In that sense, the China's the factual relationship regarding Chinese nuclear arms buildup was very important. Thank you very much. This completes my discussion.
Thank you very much. General Oue has just talked about the nuclear weapons buildup. What kind of impact will that cause? On that issue, he gave us a very detailed explanation. China currently is separating nuclear warheads from missiles in order to store them. And in Mongolia and Gansu, they are building ICBM silos, and they have been completed mostly. And also, missiles are not in silos yet, but from these silos, ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missiles, can be operated. If that is the case, launch on warning, as was mentioned earlier, launch on warning status is ready. So in this way of operational change has to be closely monitored and followed by us. But on the other hand, Japan is trying to have a counter-strike capability. However, it is not for punitive deterrence, rather. So if certain city is to engage in nuclear attack on Japanese city, and Japan is not going to attack these cities, but this is a denial deterrence network is to be produced. As part of that, the opponent missile system and related facilities are to be attacked. That is a counter-strike capability, not only Japan, but also the US other allies together with them. We will not allow such a use of nuclear weapons by other countries. That is the tenet of the counter-strike capability Japan is promoting. Now, I have a question to Dr. Kobayashi. General Oue talked about Japanese national security and impact on that. But broadly speaking, the China's civilian use plutonium diverted to military use, that may undermine NPT framework. Why is that? Could you explain that more in detail? As I said earlier, China is the country which is allowed to have nuclear weapons by NPT, one of the 5 such countries. IAEA's safeguarding section is not obligated. However, NPT is often said to be an equal treaty. Only 5 countries are allowed to possess nuclear weapons, and other members have to pursue peaceful use of atomic energy. However, that is only under IAEA inspection. So that is the treaty. Therefore, non-nuclear weapon states should undergo certain rules in order to avert the diversion into military purpose. However, the nuclear weapon states are exempted from such an obligation. Therefore, China will take advantage of that position to use plutonium for civilian use, for military use, without watch of IAEA. Then if that's the case, the compliance spirit with IAEA and NPT will be weakened. There are other countries which want to have nuclear weapons like DPRK, and also it seems that the country has already nuclear weapons like Iran, and also Brazil wants to have nuclear-powered submarines. For these countries need to have a compliance spirit, and therefore such a inequality will arise. And also at the end of the day, the NPT framework or system will be damaged, and the nuclear order will not be kept. So there is a danger, a risk like this if we look at China's endeavor to produce plutonium for military use.
Thank you. From what he said, we can understand that China should be enticed to come under the framework and table of nuclear arms control, thereby creating a solid system controlling them. On the other hand, Lieutenant General Oue mentioned that until now, it was only possible to negotiate between Russia and US. So as far as 2 countries could keep the equal deterrence capability, the nuclear arms could be controlled. However, if 3 parties are at the picture, things are different. For example, US will have to react to China and Russia both. And then in terms of numbers, US has lesser numbers. So if the number is equal, then the parity will be recognized, and Russia will have to face US and China as well. And then between US and Russia, arms control was established, but the number will not satisfy Russia if parties are threesome. So China wants to have numbers to stand against the US and Russia. So the balance will be disturbed. So Mr. Owe said that not only 3 countries, but other countries should involve themselves in making the arms control regime. So first of all, between 3 countries, the balance is not kept. If we leave things as they are, what kind of things could happen? And if we can't leave everything to 3 countries, what kind of framework is possible and effective in terms of discussion? Can you talk about it? Yes. Thank you very much for your question. I said that NPT regime is facing the danger of being the collapse. But as Dr. Kobayashi mentioned in detail, and one more thing I would like to add is the NPT is looking into the prevention of proliferation vertically and horizontally. The horizontal deterrence is not to increase the number of nuclear states, and the number of nuclear weapons by the nuclear states should be reduced. That is the vertical deterrence. At least the US and the Soviet Union try to reduce and control. But now China is coming into the picture, and they are going to increase the number and also the kinds of weaponry. So it is it is running counter to the vertical and horizontal proliferation. So NPT regime is at risk. Within this framework, China included nuclear arms control. What should be the framework with which we can effectively do the arms control? First of all, the current system that we have, NPT regime, current system should become fully functioning. We have to have international arrangements which would enable the fully functioning of NPT. Between US and Russia, what is remaining only is the nuclear by 2026, New START Convention will come to an end. That is estimated, that is planned. So New START Treaty should continue even after 2026. We should we should see a situation where between US and Russia, they should strongly negotiate to that end. And also the international community must support their move to extend the New START treaty beyond the year expected to expire. Another point, in the past, arms control was only covering nuclear arms only. However, the nuclear usage is predicated within the framework. Now then, the conventional weapon is extended to nuclear weapons. That is the transition, smooth transition. Regarding the smooth transition from conventional to nuclear arms usage, we must be prepared for that. The counterattack capability that Japan could have, I mentioned about that. In the nuclear strategy, conventional power, what is the role to be played? And new technology, drones, for example, or AI, artificial intelligence, those new technologies may come into play. It may impact the nuclear strategy. So conventional power and the state-of-the-art capability, comprehensive arms control and arms limitation regime must be on the radar screen for our work.
Thank you very much. The two speakers talked about NPT framework in Japan, and specific reasons were raised in order to avoid that eventuality. What could they do? So what was interesting in that was that transition from conventional weapons to nuclear weapons for a war. Such the borderline between the two has become blurred, or the threshold has become lower with the technology development within nuclear strategy, nuclear weapons. How are we going to position deterrence using conventional weapons, and more comprehensive arms control disarmament framework may be necessary, as was mentioned. We have received questions from the audience. So to Dr. Kobayashi, there is a question to you. Fast breeder reactor, from the plutonium, you have to extract plutonium from the available fuels at Trium. And question to General Oue. Earlier, because 3 countries will be involved, therefore it will be more unstable. However, if we increase the nuclear weapons more, then there will be less of the gap among the countries. Regarding the first question, technologically, to what extent that would be a barrier in order to extract plutonium for weapons use, I do not know. However, based on the past nuclear development, graphite reactor was used to extract plutonium. And then that has led to nuclear development. However, in a full-fledged manner, a fast breeder reactor, in order to extract the plutonium-239, there has been no previous examples. Therefore, the DoD of the United States and also their Pentagon's analysis and forecast data has been provided to that by Non-Proliferation Policy Education Center of the United States. Based in this image analysis, there is a huge range in terms of the production of plutonium prospects, because as we see in Bonji in Japan, FBRs, whether or not it will be operational for long years operationally, and also we do not know whether plutonium-239 can be extracted in a stable and efficient way. That has not been proven yet. And that is why Pentagon's projection has quite a huge range. And also there is a possibility that they will be off the mark.
So by 2030, 1,000, and by 2035, 1,500. So it's the greatest, the largest possible expected number. Now, Lieutenant General Oue, because of the tripartite structure, it's unstable. So if the number increases, it will become more stable. I don't agree with that. Come to think of it, nuclear weapons were developed and used by the United States. Later on, France, the UK, so-called nuclear, 5 countries are in the possession of nuclear weapon. The less the country, the less probability of weapon used. So I think a correct direction is to reduce the number of the number of countries possessing the weapon. So if there are more countries, there can be an accidental explosion, and there is a question about the intent of the use. What kind of a weapon is being possessed? There is always the non-transparency about the possession of the nuclear weapons. So the nuclear states shouldn't be increased. It's difficult, but I think the number of nuclear weapons should be reduced. That should be the direction, not trying to increase the number of states possessing nuclear weapons. Regarding the Japanese possibility of possessing nuclear weapons, for the last couple of years, it was much discussed in media, nuclear sharing or Japanese ability to have nuclear deterrence must be enhanced. That was the discussion. So the efforts for raising the nuclear deterrence for Japan, of course, we must make efforts. But simply you have the weapon and then can you enhance the deterrence? Or do you think that it will lessen the threat for the other countries to make nuclear attack on Japan? It is not as simple as that. Also, if Japan possesses nuclear weapon, if we make that intent very clear, South Korea, the moment we do that, South Korea and other countries will begin and feel incentives for owning nuclear weapons. As a result, it may be a negative to the Japanese security. It is possible. So the number of nuclear states, that number shouldn't be increased, especially countries like North Korea, the dictatorship country, what kind of conditions under which the weapon is to be used. We don't know it. To such a country, we shouldn't allow the possession of nuclear weapons to these countries. Dr. Kobayashi's expert domain is this, and that is the nuclear materials control. Non-state actor could come to control the nuclear materials, thereby using them to their own interests. This is the unstable situation in international community. We shouldn't have that kind of situation. So the control of nuclear materials, we should be ensuring a transparency in controlling it, and we should be reducing the level of nuclear materials.
Thank you very much. So based on what you have just said, I would like to ask you follow-up questions. If we increase the number of nuclear weapon states, in terms of the framework will be more unstable. I do understand that. Another point, control of nuclear weapons and nuclear materials. In this regard, the current nuclear weapon states are able to control nuclear weapons. I think that is admitted, acknowledged. However, if these nuclear weapons would proliferate further, then the control of nuclear weapons itself will face a problem, in my view. And the unexpected accidental nuclear explosion may occur. So if that kind of situation occurs, then the mutual deterrence based on nuclear weapons, how will it be affected? First of all, possession, the nuclear state countries, if the number increase, there will be a more likelihood of accidental explosion, and also the situation will be more unstable. That's for sure. And the current nuclear state weapons are conducting a thorough control and operate nuclear arsenal. But also countries like Japan using nuclear only for peaceful use. As Dr. Kobayashi said, we undergo IAEA inspection, so we control nuclear materials. Then if the nuclear is possessed by a non-state actor or the countries which give no regard to such a control, then it will go out of control. That will be a possibility. Now, when it comes to nuclear weapons, I think they are quite expensive, quite costly, even to possess and maintain nuclear weapons. And also it requires expertise and experts to maintain them. Therefore, the UK, America, and France, where democracy is in place and the control is in place and the budget is provided, and we understand what's happening with transparency. However, when it comes to authoritarian states or the states which cannot govern the situation, if these countries how much money would they spend to control nuclear weapons? That is quite a big question mark. So including nuclear materials, we have to make sure that nuclear weapons will not proliferate any further. Regarding nuclear deterrence, the mutually nuclear deterrence is based on mutual trust to some extent, because we know that in such and such situation, the other side would retaliate. So we would understand that that is why we would be refraining from using nuclear weapons. That is the logic. However, terrorists and rather than national security, but in order to maintain its regime, if the country wants to have nuclear weapon, not for national security, maybe they would use nuclear weapon to intimidate and threaten other countries and use nuclear weapons to other countries. Therefore, such a use of nuclear for the purpose of coercion or threatening, that is not for the purpose of deterrence, but it is we have to control non-state actors, and also we have to make sure that their objectives will not be achieved through the use of nuclear weapons, and we have to devise such a regime or system. However, easier said than done. It is very difficult to do that, and it requires the international community's effort. Having said that, even today, the nuclear proliferation is actually the reality. In view of that, we have to start wherever possible. First of all, the denuclearization of North Korea, and also the restraining China's nuclear arms development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is a question from the audience, so I will read it. This is a question to Dr. Kobayashi. Israel bombed Iran. Just like that, the Chinese plutonium development reactor is destroyed. What extent of fallout we should be prepared? What do you mean by fallout? It's a radioactive impact? As of now, the fuel is not inside it. For Israel attacked Iran, and the research reactor was attacked. At that time, it was before putting fuel inside, so we don't know the details. But what is problem now is a Zaporizhzhia's case. In the whole world, fuel-contained reactor, research reactor, experimental reactor, or a commercial reactor actually producing the power, there are no example of being destroyed. So I cannot respond to that question, to be honest. I have no answer. So commercial reactor attack never happened. It shouldn't happen, right? And it didn't happen in the past. Yes, that is correct. Okay.
Another question to General Oue from me. Earlier, you talked about nuclear sharing. In the past, I myself was involved in this discussion. If we are to have a nuclear sharing in Japan, what is the appropriate way? And other experts have already made a presentation on this. Now, the discussion of nuclear sharing should take place, in my view. However, thoroughly I try to think about this, Japan, in order to have a nuclear sharing, I cannot find the most appropriate and effective ways for nuclear sharing. Then why is it that we need such a discussion? Because America's extended deterrence is something we want to pursue, and that by discussing nuclear sharing, we can show our determination to have extended deterrence from the United States. As was mentioned earlier, deterrence is an issue of recognition. In what kind of situation the other party would use a nuclear weapon. If we can predict that, we can understand how much our deterrence is working and functioning. China is now responding to nuclear arms control because China may not recognize their nuclear deterrence is functioning. On the other hand, Japan wants to ensure that U.S. extended deterrence, as you mentioned. So in this way, China is expanding nuclear arms, and at least there is a possibility along that line. Therefore, in this situation, Japan has to ensure that U.S. extended deterrence, nuclear deterrence. But this is not the issue of only Japan, but also because of President Putin, they are recognizing the importance of this deterrence because of the nuclear saber rattling by Russia. So in order to ensure U.S. Nuclear extended deterrence, Japan cooperate with other allies and like-minded countries. What kind of framework should we try to make for that purpose? So the extended deterrence of the U.S. is functioning. That has to be shown to China, Russia, and DPRK. So Mr. Ohara said, I almost in agreement, completely agreement with what you have just said. But nuclear sharing, NATO has a nuclear sharing, so you can associate that nuclear sharing to that endeavor. Then in concrete way, what are we going to do? B-61 U.S. nuclear bomb will come to Misawa, and Air Self-Defense Force has a F-35, and that can be mounted on that. And Japan's F-35 would use a B-61 U.S. nuclear bomb. And I think this is the only method we can use. Then is it really the lead to reduction of nuclear threat vis-a-vis Japan? I don't think so, not necessarily. And experts are saying that would not reduce that threat of nuclear against Japan, and I agree to that. However, China and North Korea, they have actually nuclear threats to us. What could we do to address that? That has to be thoroughly discussed. For one thing, Japan itself should have nuclear weapons. that can be discussed. Under the current NPT, it is not possible. However, at the end of the day, in order to ensure national security, there is no other option, then Japan can withdraw from NPT to have a nuclear weapon. So that is possible. However, that would go counter to the international community's efforts to reduce nuclear threat. Therefore, I think this is not the choice for Japan. However, for example, peaceful use of nuclear energy, we have a technology for that, and also we have space-related technology like rockets. Also, nuclear power plant related researchers. We do have this technology and expertise, and also we have many other related technologies. And if we are very serious, and if we make a serious decision to possess nuclear weapons, then I think since we have technology and expertise, and other countries think that Japan has the capability to develop and possess nuclear weapons not too distant future. And Prime Minister Tanaka said that we are able to possess nuclear weapons, but we deliberately refrain from that option because we pursue peaceful use of nuclear energy, and also we combined that to a nuclear deterrence very effectively. So I think such a potential capability should be maintained. I think that is very important. At the end of the day, I think this is a psychological war, cognitive war. So Japan's 3 non-nuclear principles, based on that, Japanese people do not consider much about nuclear deterrence, nuclear strategy, and Japanese people do not have opportunity to learn about that because of the 3 non-nuclear principles. In order to maintain 3 non-nuclear principles, and we have to discuss whether that would help us ensure national security, we need to have a national debate, and also experts have to present a format for people to understand better. So I think that would lead to increased nuclear deterrence at the end of the day.
Thank you very much. Time has come, but with your permission, I have a question to Dr. Kobayashi. Mr. Oue made remarks. In the context of what he said, Japan should have nuclear capability, and then we can participate into the framework making. I think that was more or less implied. So, Dr. Kobayashi, in your remarks earlier on, you said that amongst the non-nuclear states, we are the only country which was allowed to have the spent fuel reprocessing. That's why Japan has a power of say. On the other hand, as you said, the anti-nuclear allergy is very strong amongst the Japanese people. So how do we reconcile these elements so that Japan can be a part of the international community for nuclear arms control? Can you be precise? Well, thank you. Japan is cooperating with IAEA and thoroughly pursuing a peaceful use of nuclear energy. So we have technology, and we have the nuclear fuel retrieving as well as the fast breeder reactor. We have the surveillance system already established. So we have a technology basis. So we can transfer such technology and capability to other countries. NPT 5 countries, they would contradict amongst one another for the proliferation. But regarding they are unanimous about preventing proliferation. So how to control nuclear materials? So next round of NPT conference, the suspension of production of nuclear materials. What would be the condition enabling that? What it would be the condition to start discussion? What is the surveillance system? We can provide such a technology. We can lead by proposing such relevant technologies. That is what I think. Thank you very much, Dr. Kobayashi and Lieutenant General Oue were in the program. Thank you very much for your contribution, and thank you very much for watching this program. With this, we would like to complete the SPF China Observer Public Forum. Thank you very much.
以上で笹川平和財団主催 SPF チャイナオブザーバー公開フォーラムを終了いたします。ご視聴ご参加いただきありがとうございました。